Hey guys, it's Jim Warrior, and it is time for another YouTube Pagan Challenge. Just barely. We're just barely getting into Sunday. But I want to go ahead and film it because my life has just become so crazy throughout the week now. With my boyfriend's changing schedule at work, um, we get to spend more time together, which is nice, and it's really unavoidable because we live together. But sometimes it's taken away so much of my free time to myself. Which is probably a good thing because I'm a huge hermit in my life, and an introvert, so it's probably good that I get more interaction. But I, I am a little upset about it, which is bad because you would think that I'd be overjoyed to spend more time with him. But I just really value alone time. Anyway, I'm gonna take a bite of this potato salad, and then I'm gonna start this video. Mm. Mm-hmm. That is like some good southern food right there. And now I need to drink a lemonade. Okay. So, this week's YouTube Pagan Challenge is another what does this time of the year mean to you video, which I've noticed the Sea Priest has kind of sprinkled through on the Sabbath holidays. But since I don't really, sorry, there was like something distracting here. But since I don't really celebrate all of the Sabbaths in the traditional senses, and I incorporate different holidays and stuff into my wheel, which we did have a topic on the Wheel of the Year, and I talked about which Sabbaths I practice and which ones I don't, and which holidays that are completely outside of the like witches or Wiccan Wheel of the Year that I do practice and celebrate. Anyway, with that said, this one probably won't just be about Beltaine, really, which is what I think a lot of us will be talking about, right? Um, I want to specifically talk about the god behind Beltaine because I think that's crazy. Because I think a lot of us do celebrate Beltaine in some capacity, be we witches or not. A lot of pagans do celebrate Beltaine, but we don't always really look beyond what the surface of Beltane is. And I think for a lot of people, they just say, oh, Beltane is about celebrating the coming of summer and celebrating sex and having sex because nature's starting to have a lot of sex right now. And it's a metaphor and a physical representation of fertility and abundance, sex, like physical sex between two or more people. Because Beltane, I think, is infamous for a lot of like group sex and like Dionysian activity. But I don't think that that's all that Beltane is. Certainly, that is a part of Beltane. And I think that Beltane alone, just Beltane, is probably the Sabbath that differs us the most from any other religious paths. Because we have, as pagans, and I guess I'm speaking specifically as witches here, but again, many non-witch pagans celebrate Beltane as well. But I think that as witches, Beltane is what makes us the most distinctly different from our Abrahamic brothers and sisters, and even some of our own pagan brothers and sisters. Um, because it does have that sexual connotation and an unapologetic sexual connotation. I think that witchcraft and paganism does not dismiss the idea of sexual fluidity, if you know what I mean. The morals and ethics put on sex in witchcraft and in paganism at large is so free. You really can do whatever you want. um, and it doesn't matter. You're not going to go be punished for it. You can do whatever you want. And that's reflected, of course, in our deities, where they are very, what we would call, if I'm going to be very blunt with you, what we would probably call sluts and whores. The gods are kind of slutty, if we're really going to put it into a modern context. But sex wasn't seen the same way back then. And there was so much more openness with just sexuality. It wasn't tied into relationship. like it is now for most of us. Um, but again, that's not just what this holiday is about. At least to me, that's not what this time of the year means to me. It's not just about sex and maybe going beyond your normal sexual self and experimenting this time of the year. That's not what it's about. For me, it's about the uncovering of the self. Um, because throughout the winter, at least I go into this extreme hermit mode. Um, I get very lazy and lethargic and unmotivated, but in a necessary way. Like, I need that time to just kind of like shut down. And then this time of the year is when I start feeling a little bit more like, not quite yet. I'm not at the peak of it yet, but I start to feel a little bit more like, okay, I'm going to move around and do something now. I want to go outside. I want to be active. I want to go do something. I want to learn new things. I get much more alive, right? I'm awake. And I think a lot of my continued feelings about this time of the year come from my working with the spirit behind this holiday so many years ago. And I haven't worked with him in a long time. But I feel like he's always there for me to draw on if I need him. And I guess now I'm starting to feel like I need him again, because I've been thinking about him a lot the past couple of months, since like February, like January actually. I've been thinking about him a lot, and I guess I need to work with him. But again, I've been still stuck a little bit in a lazy mode where even like extreme forms of magic seem like too much work to me. Like, like intense ritual, you know. Plus, I must confess that I've really been drawn into the digital world lately, like mundanely and magically. I just want to spend all my time doing things cybernetically, if I can use that word. Um, I haven't really been unplugged, but anyway, let me just get to my point for this video because I'm just going on and on, which is about Bel, the god Bel, who I did talk about in I believe I talked about him in the Will of the Year video that I did, and I think I know I talked about him in my Magical Spirit Family video, because I work with him juxtaposed with Apollo, which isn't uncommon, even in pre-neo-paganism, like traditional paganism, the original paganism. They juxtaposed their gods as well. I mean, let's look at the Greco-Romans. All those gods are juxtaposed. But I do work with Apollo and Bel as one entity, and they're very elf-like in appearance, which is bizarre considering both deities. But I'm sorry, I just have to take another bite of this. It's just so good, and it's sitting right in front of me. I would have to eat it. But Bel is the god behind Beltaine, and of course Beltaine is a Celtic fire festival. So of course Bel is a Celtic deity. Although he wasn't really worshipped, primarily anyway. He was worshipped all over the Celtic lands and beyond, like every god was. But Bel was primarily, we believe, just from the artifacts that we have found, Bel was primarily worshipped in France. But he was seen all the way over into like Slovenia too, which is crazy. But yeah, he was celebrated roughly around May the 1st. They would light fires, burn the wicker man as a symbol of saying goodbye to winter and welcoming in, farming season and mating seasons and all this summer. So Bel was seen as like a fire deity. He was a solar deity. He was associated with the sun, so that's why the Romans, the Greco-influenced Romans, when they came to study, aka conquer, the Celtic lands, they associated Bel with Apollo, who is the Greco-Roman god of the sun. But they're not really the same. They're really not. That's, for me personally, that's where they end if I'm going to separate the two deities. If I'm going to unjuxtapose them, Apollo and Bel are really different people. Apollo is very, very different. Like even their color associations. Like I associate Apollo with like the colors like gold, white, browns, red. And then I think of Bel and I think of like black and blue and silver, dark, dark green. Not solar colors, really. And I think that's because the Celtic gods are so untraditional. Their names are weird, given their cultural contexts, like the cultural language, like the ancient Gaelic languages, dialects. The they're not necessarily phonetically the same as their gods' names. It's so strange. It's almost like the names of the gods came from completely different places and were incorporated into their language. It's really strange. Or like they had the names of their gods and then they developed this language that was phonetically different. It's really strange. And I wish we had more information on the Celts. It's so maddening that it has all been lost. Those damn bastards didn't write shit down. Ugh. But he did become known as Bel at some point, Bel, and the Romans called him Belinus because they always have to add a us to everything. But yes, he was I guess technically considered a solar deity by a lot of people, but I think the Celts themselves, and of course this is just me thinking this just from what we have, which is so little on this god. Google Bel and you will find almost nothing of substance besides people's ponderings of who he is. But Bel is, I think, like Bridget or Bride or Breed, that really famous Celtic goddess. He is a fire and a water god, like her. It's a paradoxical god. It's a god of both sides of the fence. And I think that makes him really not unapproachable, but it makes it really hard for you to be able to categorize him because he is so contradictory, even in his behavior when you work with him. I mean, again, I'm speaking personally from my experience, but when you work with him, he's so paradoxical. Like he'll say things, but then do something else, or he'll do something and then say something else. And they're not always contrasting with each other. Sometimes they do complement each other, the actions and words that he says and does, but he's just a lot to take in. And he's not a trickster at all. He's very straightforward God. But he's just I can't categorize it. He's just very strange. But very, very very silent and very powerful. Like he has a lot of strength and power, but he doesn't flaunt it and he doesn't even talk about it. He doesn't even show it. He doesn't do displays of power for you like some gods do. He's just powerful. That's just a fact for him, not a boast. And he's he's really great to work with. It sucks that I can't put this into better words, but he's amazing. And I know he's been associated with horses, but I can't find the historical context for that. I don't know why he's associated with horses really, but I know he has been as well as a lot of wells. A lot of bodies of water like wells and lakes and streams and things. But yet we honor him with fire. And it's just really strange. It's really strange. He is super erotic though. The little bit of artifacts that we have found, he's definitely got to be like a fertility god, right? A god of summer and spring because all of his imagery is very erotic. There'll be images of him making love to inanimate objects, to people, images of him with like with a really large phallus. He's super erotic. Not just in that sense, like metaphorically, but he's like actually very erotic when you work with him. He's very sexual and sensual. That's just a fact for him too. It's not a boast. It's just a part of his energy. He's very powerful, but he's also like just always kind of turned on. He just is. But he's an amazingly powerful god, and he's a god of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not attitude, but like a god of like spice, like a god of like embodiment. I don't know if I can explain it. He lives in his self. his whole self all the time, 100%. He doesn't filter or turn things on and off like we've just learned to do, to the point where we don't even realize that we do it anymore. He's just always on, 100% unfiltered. But anyway, so this time of the year really always makes me reflect on him and want to work with him, read about him, and I always come to the same place every year where I'm like, there is not enough information about you, sir. And also, I kind of get why there's not a lot of information, because you're really kind of hard to understand and to comprehend and to put out into words. And maybe that's why the Celts didn't keep a written language so much. Maybe that's one of the reasons anyway, besides the idea that they didn't want their information twisted and corrupted. But in not keeping records, it has become twisted and corrupted anyway. Maybe they also didn't keep written records a lot of their deities specifically, because across the board, even Bride and Morgan, the Morgan and all these gods, they are so strange. They can be so paradoxical. Like, every Celtic god is so paradoxical. You can't point out one to me that's not. I'm sorry, you just can't. They all have things that are so completely opposite from other things that they do and say. And I guess we do that too as people, but it's just strange to see it in these deities, because I don't see it with other pantheons. Anywho, this has been a really big ramble, I know. And I've raised just lots of questions and not answered anything, really. But that's currently the mood that I'm in. And I guess that's just what had to come out with this video. Again, oh, you know what? Side note. That is one thing that makes Bel so different from Apollo too. And that I find it strange that they were equated. And that I myself work with them together as like one person. Because Apollo is all about structure and order, to the point almost where it's obnoxious. And Bel's very much like not, like I just explained. It's almost like two sides of culture or people. Like, Bel's like the renegade rebel kid, and Apollo's like the preppy jock kid. Like, how are they juxtaposed? I don't know, but they are. Anywho, I'm gonna go wrap this up now, because that's been really random. But that's what this time of the year means to me. It means really a lot of like allowing myself to work again, to start cranking the wheels, and to think, and to get excited, and to move around, and to learn, and to search. It's about growing, I guess. This time of the year is about growing for me, which is appropriate because the plants are growing outside. They're coming back. They're growing. They're growing up again. So I'm unthawing. I'm coming back to life. I'm regrowing this time of the year. I am, I guess. And anyway, that's it, you guys. Yeah, that's it. Bye, you guys. I hope you're well wherever you are. Namaste and Ashe.